Okay, so today we're going to be attempting to type Bret Easton Ellis, who I believe is an SI DOM, what we call a constraint narrator, with TI in service to SI and expanding to epi expression with an NE anchor inferior function. So basically what a constraint narrator means is their steady state is highly detailed, focused on the tangible and the environment externally, how it's affecting their point of view, is more so in relation to refining that experience and what they understand from that experience, which makes them an internal builder, naturally, a built-in guide, meaning that they expand to guide from a building point of view. And because it's heavily focused on clarity in relation to SI and TI, you will hear through their monologue and narration, detailed in its approach and what happened next. And one of the things that you'll notice is not only the balance within their judgment, but also how they're not expanding outside of themselves into the external world as much as they are explaining how they understood, refined the information that they have perceived internally.
I think that at the time when American Psycho, the book, was canceled in 1990.
Canceled how?
My publisher, who had asked me to write the book and had paid me money to write the book, I received the manuscript finally, and they said, and it took about a year for this to happen. There were immediate negative responses in the company when the manuscript for American Psycho came in January of 1990.
Okay.
So what you notice is not only is he talking about the immediate responses and them being negative, he's highlighting his functions. He's telling you basically through the high amounts of detail through the monologue and making more clarity by going back and adding in little things like the time in which it happened, the year even, and then also sharing how those negative responses or feedback that he's received, he's also paying attention to. Also highlights his use of FE and the expressiveness of his opinion in relation to what is.
My editor said, we have some controversy about this book, but I believe in it and I like it, and let me take care of this. All right, so February, March. I find out in March that the man who had done both of my hardcover the covers for Less Than Zero and The Rules of Attraction refused to work on American Psycho, refused to do a cover because he thought the book was the most disgusting thing he'd ever read in his life. He wanted nothing to do with it. My editor said, we'll get someone else. Don't worry about it. April, May, articles are now appearing that there is an uproar at Simon & Schuster, my publishing house, about this new novel by Bret Easton Ellis. And that some staffers are complaining that they don't think the book should be published at all, at any publisher, but not the one they're working for. This went on through the summer. I would occasionally open up a magazine and see an article about this book, American Psycho. The controversy was building and building and building. And finally, I realized, talking to my agent, my editor, that they were not going to publish the book. They were going to cancel it and get rid of me. So I knew about this about 2 weeks before it was announced publicly in November. We're now talking about 11 months later. And the publishing house issued a statement saying, we have decided not to publish Mr. Ellis's third novel due to reasons of taste. It is offensive. They seem to not understand the satire of it. They seem to take the book literally. They seemed to believe that a depiction of violence is an act of violence. A depiction of misogyny is an act of misogyny. they read it wrong. And so they canceled it and they fired me. And they couldn't take back the advance that they'd given me, the money they'd given me. They asked me to write the novel. They said, what is your third novel? And I said, it's about a young guy who works on Wall Street who happens to also be a serial killer. We love it. We love it. That's all I told them. And they gave me a ton of money to write this book. Well, a ton of money in 1987, 86. And I had a couple bestsellers before. So anyway.
So the reason I wanted to actually add a little bit more of this narrative approach from a tangible point of view, which is SI, I wanted to highlight how he's so constrained to what happened, what is, yet at the same time feeding it through FE expression. And you could hear the TI filtering what is based upon what he understands all at the same time. This highlights more than just one function. It's a package. And basically what you get within that package is these functions that are being used simultaneously in order to become functional processes. SITI and SIFE, guided, building, or built-in guide. The more accurate way is built-in guide, but you can clearly see what's going on here. And I will highlight one more other part within this video that I think is relative to explaining why he is his type.
Novels, and I wrote my first novel at 13 or 14. I was an active kid. I was also playing piano and guitar, and but I was solitary. I was a very solitary child. And really, if I had to look at a main trauma of my childhood, was that my father had checked out. Father wasn't around. Didn't really like the son that he had. Wanted a different son. And that was something I recognized. I noticed it. I felt it at a very young age, that I was not the son my father wanted. My father wanted the big, all-American, sports-loving, kid, not the introvert who's sitting in a corner reading, a paperback, but he wanted like an athlete, and he wanted a real manly man kind of son, and I just wasn't that. So if I had to, otherwise, the older I get and I look at my childhood, I feel somewhat privileged. It was a privileged childhood. But there was that key thing missing, and that is that a boy needs his father. And I recognize that more and more the older I get, how important that relationship is for the development of the son.
Yeah.
Because the people I know, the boys I know, the men I know who had lousy, terrible relationships with their father are far more of a mess than the guys I know who had really good relationships with their father and still have good relationships with their father. I know I still have damages that I still carry with me because I did not have a father.
So what you're picking up on is the consistent reloading of what is and verifying it through the details and still expressing those details openly and willingly. And notice how it's not sounding personal. Notice how it's a lot of how he understands it and comparing his life and experiences along with others in order to verify further what is.
Mend them somehow, but that's my, but my childhood and the older I get, I think was nowhere near Michelle's.
So did you bury it or did you deal with it?
I wrote about it. That's how I deal with everything.
Yeah.
I write about it. And when I resented my father so much. I mean, it bordered on hatred at times. I just couldn't believe that he would treat his family the way he did. I just thought he had an opportunity to, well, who knows? Maybe he ultimately just didn't want to be a dad.
Is he alive?
No, he died very young. He died in 1992, actually. And basically he did not take very good care of himself. And so he died quite young. He died at 50. And anyway, so how I dealt with it, and I hadn't spoken to him for a year before he died. I had not spoken to my father for a year before it. I couldn't stand him. I was so angry with him. He was just such a prick. A very angry guy, an alcoholic. You want the list? It's the typical list.
Yeah.
And so, and then having him die without having some kind of, talk, a final confrontation of some kind was so frustrating. And I found myself writing a book that was kind of about him. It was my Stephen King novel, my Stephen King homage. It was a haunted house book called Lunar Park. It was about a man, very much like me, haunted by his father, haunted by his father's ghost. And in the end of the book, and this is not a spoiler, you can read the book and there are still plenty of surprises, but in the end of the book, he forgives his father. The character forgives his father. And I remember writing those pages. I was staying at my mother's house in Los Angeles, finishing up the book, in my childhood room. And I remember writing those pages and I felt it all go away. I felt everything lift off me in those final pages where the character, my narrator, forgives his father. I couldn't believe the experience. I will never forget that experience. And not only that, through that forgiveness, I completely understood him. I understood him in a way that my anger never let me. I understood that his own unhappiness and disappointments in his life and the things that had made him such an angry man and had driven him to alcoholism and his parents. And, it just was, I have nothing but sympathy and love for my father now. And and that came through writing. It simply came through writing.
So, in conclusion, you can see the pacified builder speaking about the narrations of his life, utilizing TI for consistencies of how he understands his personal experiences, and expanding to guide, which is the transformative fix, and utilizing Epi to share those experiences. His combative ideator, which is NETE, and seeing not only different possibilities, but how it worked in relation to the narrative. So the NETE is a response factor, but if you lead with a perception function, you also have a shard broken perception opposite. And also you can see at the end his humbled dreaming fix, which actually spoke to how he started to forgive his father, and at the end came to a conclusion for himself and spoke to the points and why he is his type. Thanks guys for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think, what system that you use, and if you typed him anything different within the system that you use, feel free to put it in the comments. Later.